For the last 18 years of my life, my biggest physical challenge every year has had something to do with running. I won Nike Cross Nationals in high school, I was a 6-time D1 All-American in college, I made it to the Olympic trials and steeplechase, and since moving to the trails, I've won a national title and made 2 USA World Teams. And while I'm still going to be chasing some big running goals this year, it's the first year in 18 years where my biggest physical challenge has nothing to do with racing, because this year, I'm pregnant. This is what it looks like to train, compete, and listen to my body while growing a little human. This is Running for Two. I wanted to make this series because when Drew and I got married, we faced the question that every couple faces at some point: do we want to have kids? Both of us grew up thinking that we did want to have kids, but we also grew up in a generation, and maybe one of the first generations in the US, that was kind of questioning if they wanted to have kids, and it was becoming more and more common to not have kids, kind of to pursue your own goals and dreams. I also grew up in a generation where I watched a lot of pro runners that I looked up to, and I saw that their careers kind of ended once they got pregnant. They would either get pregnant and retire from running, or a lot of times their sponsors would end up cutting them once they got pregnant, or they had a really hard time just finding another sponsor. So I kind of grew up thinking that once you had kids, that was the end of your running career. I wanted to make this series because I really believe that you can have family and also chase after your dreams and goals. I really believe that family and kids are such a blessing, and they bring so much joy to life. And I know it's going to take sacrifice to have kids, but at the same time, I don't think that you have to give up on your dreams to have kids. And honestly, it's been really motivating for me to think about dreams and goals while having kids, because Drew and I really want to instill values of being hardworking, doing the best that you can in any situation, using the gifts and the talents that you have for good, and just have passion for things in life. Whether that's running, a different sport that you do, music, reading, writing, math, whatever it is that you really love doing and you're passionate about is awesome, and you have those talents to use for good. We also want to show our kids that if you work hard and succeed, that's great, but if you work really hard and fail, that's still okay. You still are loved, you still have value, and everyone fails at some point, and if you fail, you probably learned something along the way, and you also probably got farther than you would have if you hadn't even tried at all. Those are really important things that we want to teach our kids, so we're being careful to mirror that for our kids and to be the example for them. I also want to be a resource out there for pregnant women and be open about my journey, because I know there will be so many ups and downs, and I don't think there are a ton of resources out there for women who are running pregnant, so I really want to be a resource for that and just be open about my journey and share what's going on. I know that every pregnancy is totally different. Some people might be having a way easier time than me, some people may have a way harder time than me, but I think that just sharing the journey can help a lot of women. So I hope this helps you if you're going through pregnancy or thinking about going through pregnancy later on. In this video, I'm going to take you through weeks 1 through 9 of pregnancy. Alright, so week 1 of pregnancy. This is a wild fact. They should definitely teach this in health class, or maybe they did and I just was not paying attention at all in high school when I was taught this, but I realized medically when they're counting 40 weeks of pregnancy, week 1 is when you're on your period. So week 1 is that last menstrual cycle that you have before having a baby. So you're actually on your period in week 1 of pregnancy, which absolutely blew my mind when I found that out. And I've been telling all my friends and they are mind blown too. So apparently it was not taught to us in health class. You're not actually pregnant with the baby and unique DNA and all of that until week 3. And this week of training, if you've been watching my other videos, I got COVID in October and it turned into long COVID, and I was recovering all the way almost through November. So this week was the first week that I was really starting to feel good again and training was kind of starting to click again. I ran 52 miles this week with 6,000 feet of elevation gain. And with all of the running, the cross training, the strength training I trained for about 13 hours that week. I had one really good workout with friends. I had a really fun long run with Courtney, one of my best friends here in Boulder, and I was starting to feel really good again. Like I said, I wouldn't actually have unique DNA in me and the baby starting to form until week 3, but this is what the doctors count as week 1 of pregnancy out of that 40 weeks that they count. The next week, week 2, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on because, like I said, I wasn't actually pregnant bit at this point, even though it's technically week 2 of pregnancy. I was still feeling very normal. Training was about the same this week as I was the previous week. I ran for 54 miles, I ran 4,300 feet of elevation, and I trained for about 12 and a half hours. This week I did a threshold workout with Drew that was super fun, and I also got in some speed work too. And that brings us to week 3. So week 3 is actually when the baby is formed. That is when the sperm and the egg meet and create that new unique DNA that's different from Drew's DNA, different from my DNA. It's a completely new human. Doctors at this point obviously can't tell if it's a boy or a girl, but that is already determined in the DNA, which is just wild. I took this week actually as a down week because I had had about 3 weeks of building back up since having long COVID, and so I needed a week to kind of reload. I reduced my intensity a lot. I did one really light workout just to keep some pop in my legs, but the rest of the week was pretty relaxed and easy running. This week I ran for 54 miles, but I didn't go on any big trail runs or do that much cross training, so my elevation was only around 1,400 feet, and I trained for about 8 hours that week. Okay, on to week 4. At this point, I had taken my down week the week before. I was ready to build up mileage again. I actually upped my mileage a good amount this week, and I ran 65 miles with 5,000 feet of elevation gain, and I did about 10 hours of training. So I didn't cross train quite as much, but I did up my mileage a good amount this week. This week also, I was maybe starting to feel some symptoms, but to me, it really just felt like PMS symptoms, like how I would feel right before having my period. So that's kind of what I was experiencing this week. I just felt a lot of fatigue. I felt like I didn't really have that much pop in my legs, but I was still able to build up my mileage a little bit. And I didn't know that I was pregnant at this point. Maybe if I had taken a pregnancy test, it would have come up positive at this point if it was an early detection test, but I didn't take it this week. This week was also a little bit weird for me because Drew and I knew that we wanted to try to have kids this year, but you can't really plan exactly when you have kids. If you've been following me, you probably know that I had an eating disorder in college, so I wasn't sure how easy it was to get pregnant or if I could even get pregnant. I'd had my period and been healthy for a while, but you just never know with those types of things, and there's things that you just can't control in life. So at that point, I didn't think that we were pregnant. I really thought that I was about to start my period again, and I was also kind of in this place where it was the end of the year and my sponsors were starting to ask me what I was going to do for races for the next year. So I kind of had to start planning all of my races and my race schedule, but I also knew that I might have to pivot if we ended up being able to get pregnant. So it was kind of this weird space where I didn't want to just sit idly by because I didn't know if we would be able to get pregnant. I knew that I needed to be proactive and just treat this year like any other year until we found out that we were pregnant. But yeah, I just really didn't know what was going to happen. So that was kind of a weird week of planning and kind of getting excited for some things that could happen race-wise the next year, but also kind of not knowing if those things were going to pan out at all. And this week of pregnancy, the fertilized egg is attached to the uterine wall and the cells are rapidly dividing, and the placenta is also being formed this week. So that's why a lot of women feel a lot of fatigue even early on in pregnancy, because your body is just working in overdrive to start making that placenta. And now it's time to move on to week 5. So week 5, I was still feeling those same symptoms that I have before I start my period, where I'm just really sluggish and have no pop in my legs and have a lot of fatigue. But these symptoms were lasting for a long time. So I was kind of wondering what was going on here, because it was insane how long these PMS symptoms were lasting. I'd also just gotten my Oura ring like a month before this, and so I've been tracking some of my data, and I hadn't gone through a full month with it yet, but I did notice that my temperature was a little bit higher and my heart rate was about 5 or 10 beats per minute higher than it normally was. So with the temperature, I learned that during your luteal phase, which is the phase right after you ovulate, kind of right up until your period, your temperature is a little bit higher and then it dips right before your period. And I was having all these PMS symptoms, but my temperature wasn't dipping, and my resting heart rate was also a little bit higher than it normally is. So I decided to take a pregnancy test because of that, and because we were about to go see our families for Christmas, and it would be super exciting to be able to give them the news in person if we were pregnant. So I took the pregnancy test and got a positive test. Drew and I were so excited. Drew actually didn't believe it when I showed him the positive pregnancy test at first.
No way. Actually?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I couldn't fake this.
What? Are you actually pregnant?
Yeah, I can't fake that.
What?
We were both really stoked with the news. So training for this week, I ran for 59 miles. ran 5,200 feet of gain, and I trained for about 10 hours. During that week, I did a speed workout with Drew, 20 by a minute on, a minute easy, and actually the day that I found out I was pregnant, I did a threshold workout. I actually felt terrible in this workout, and my paces were already about 20 or 30 seconds slower than they normally are, but at least this time I had a reason why. I took the test when I was 5 weeks, 4 days pregnant, and at that point we were only a few days away from the baby's heart starting to beat, because the heart starts beating in week 6. I was feeling so flat running this week, and I was kind of wondering how this was affecting me already, because I knew that later on in pregnancy you're delivering a lot of oxygen to the baby, but at this point I knew my baby was only probably the size of a poppy seed and not using a ton of oxygen. So I did some research and found out that when you're pregnant, you are rapidly increasing your blood volume. So your body is making a lot more blood to be able to support the baby and you. So because of this giant increase in blood, the blood volume is going up, but hemoglobin, which is what delivers oxygen to your cells, stays the exact same. You're not gaining any hemoglobin, but you're gaining a lot of new blood. So this dilutes your blood a lot, and you're just not able to carry oxygen to your cells as efficiently, and that's what makes it so hard to run early on in pregnancy. But don't worry, you usually bounce back from this and your body kind of recovers and adjusts to a new normal. Like I said, also, your resting heart rate is also a little bit elevated at this time, and your max heart rate never goes up. Your max heart rate always kind of just stays the same at what it is, or slightly lowers as you age. And so your resting heart rate is a little bit higher, and it just makes it so that you get into higher heart rate zones a lot easier, even at a lower power output. Week 6 of pregnancy. I actually felt terrible this week, but it was also the week that Drew and I got to go to Texas, which is where my family lives, and we got to see them for Christmas. So it was a really fun week, even though I was feeling so bad in running. We got to tell them the news, and they were so excited for us, and we all just got to celebrate together, and it honestly made me care a little bit less that I was feeling so bad while I was running. It was really, really fun to celebrate with my family, but I was also having a really hard time with motivation this week, because I knew that I was just going to get slower and slower during pregnancy, and so it was really hard to create some goals and things that I wanted to do this year. And like I said, I had also kind of started planning for this year and some of the races that I thought I was going to do this year, and I was getting really excited for some of those races, and I was really, really pumped to be pregnant, but I just had to shift my view. So it was a few weeks of getting excited for something like pregnancy and then it not happening, and so starting to try to get excited for something else like racing the next year, and then figuring out that that wasn't happening either, and reshifting my mindset to, okay, now we're pregnant. What are going to be my goals and what am I going to be shooting for this year? So kind of just a weird time for motivation for me, and that's probably also some of the emotional and just hormonal changes during pregnancy too. This week, because I was feeling a little bit rough, my mileage decreased some, so I only ran about 45 miles. We were in Texas, so I didn't get that much elevation gain, and I trained for 7.5 hours. I did some 200s on my old high school track, which was really fun, and Drew ran with me, so that was also really fun to have him there, but I was still feeling quite sluggish and just like I didn't have any pop in my step. I also just didn't have any endurance at all. Even running a normal, easy 8-mile run felt really hard for me to think about. It just felt like I had no endurance that week. Drew and I tried to go on an 8-mile run one day, and we ended up walking for about 2 miles of the run, because around mile 5 my heart rate was just spiking so much. My breathing was out of control, even though we were going at a really easy, relaxed, controlled pace. But Drew was really great. He walked with me and we made it back. But I definitely had some runs that week that were not the best. Okay, week 7. This was the worst week of pregnancy so far, but part of that is because I got a stomach bug. So we went to Virginia that week to visit Drew's family, and the first night we were there, I started throwing up all the time. I probably threw up like 7 times that night and just couldn't sleep and was feeling terrible. And I thought that was the start of nausea. And I was really, really scared because I was wondering if that was how the rest of pregnancy was going to be. But after probably about the 5th time that I threw up, I started thinking that this was something a little bit more than just pregnancy nausea, and I'm so glad that I was right, because I was miserable that night. I have been paying attention to my HRV, which just means heart rate variability, and basically if it's going up, then you're recovering well, and if it's going down, that means you are under recovered, and it's a really great metric and Oura ring to pay attention to while you're training. So this week I ran 39 miles, and I ran for about 5 hours. Okay, we are finally at week 8 of pregnancy, which is the point where I had a major turnaround. My HRV shot up, so I started feeling a lot better, and my resting heart rate was back down close to the baseline that it was at before I was pregnant. My energy went way up this week, and my endurance finally felt like it was way up. I did a run with my friends in the trails where we ran for over 2 hours in the snow, and it was amazing. That's one of my favorite runs so far this year. So I was feeling really good again. I didn't do any big workouts this week because after the previous week, I just felt like I needed to spend a little bit of time recovering before I hopped in a workout again, and I was finally starting to feel good again, and so I didn't really want to push it. I wanted to just have a good week of solid training and easy running before trying to push workouts again. I ran for 42 miles this week, got in 10 hours of training, and ran about 5,000 feet of elevation gain. Also this week was my first doctor's appointment and ultrasound, which was so fun. We got to see our baby. Drew went with me, which was super fun and special, and we got an update on how everything was looking. Everything was looking good, except my one little hurdle in pregnancy so far is that I have a subchorionic, I think that's how you pronounce it, hematoma, which just means that there is a small tear where the amniotic sac has torn away a little bit from the uterine wall. My doctor didn't really sound that concerned about it. She said that this is pretty common in the first trimester, and usually it resolves itself by the second trimester, but she told me just to be safe to cut my mileage in half from what I had been doing, which, like you've seen, I hadn't really been doing that much, or I hadn't really been doing my normal load. Normally I'd probably be running 60 to 70 mile weeks, and at this point I was probably a little bit closer to 40-ish miles a week in what I had been doing, so I needed to cut my mileage down to 20 to 25 miles. My doctor did say that I could cross train, which I'm very, very happy about. She said I could cross train as much as I wanted to. I just needed to lower the impact that running has on your body. So totally worth it to keep our baby safe, but I'm a little bit sad not to be able to run as much as I'm used to in this first trimester because I was really starting to feel good. But hopefully everything recovers well and I can get back to a normal training load a little bit later on in pregnancy. And that brings us all the way to week 9 of pregnancy. So at this point I'm running every other day because I figured that that's a good way to just cut my mileage in half, is to just run every other day of the week. My HRV was a little bit lower than it had been the week before, but I didn't really feel it that much. And part of the reason for that was I also didn't do workouts this week. I just took everything easy. I decided I just really wanted to be safe with what the doctor was telling me and how the pregnancy was progressing. So I decided to cut back on workouts for that week and just enjoy some easy cross training and running with friends. I ran 21 miles, got in 10.5 hours of training with the running and cross training combined, and I ran 2,300 feet of elevation gain. I also used this week to kind of start refocusing and getting excited about some of the goals for this year and creating some of those. My number one priority is probably the biggest physical challenge I have ever gone through in my life, which is to deliver a baby and to prioritize our baby's health this year. So that is my number one priority, number one goal this year, no matter what. I also would love to race a little bit and go on some adventures too. So I started planning out some races where if my doctor clears me when I have my next appointment, hopefully I'll be able to go on. But we'll see. I'm holding some of those things loosely, but I do think that I'll be able to adventure some this year and push my body in some kind of way. My other goal is an injury-related goal. I have had this chronic hamstring pain for about 2 years, and it's never stopped me from running. It's just always kind of there and nagging, and it's super annoying. It doesn't stop me from training, but it is really, really, really annoying. So I'm really hoping to get that better this year. I'm working with a great OB that is my doctor for all things baby, and then I also am working with a running specific doctor that can help me with my form, help me with rehab. He can help me with getting blood work done, all these things. It's kind of like an all-inclusive doctor for all of the running things. He understands runners so well. He's a runner himself, and so yeah, super excited to work with him. He's the one that recommended me to the OB that I have, so I just feel like I have such great support this year, and I have a really, really great team of doctors around me, so I'm very, very thankful for that. It's been so nice being in Boulder. I feel like I'm surrounded already by so many friends, and Drew is so supportive too, and so yeah, I'm just really excited and ready for this year and all the things that it'll bring. Anyway, that is the summary of how pregnancy has been going. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you have enjoyed this series so far. Just the first video, but let me know in the comments what you would like to see. I would love to just be really open with this journey and telling you all what is going on. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe for more running content and I guess pregnancy content and adventure in the trails, and I'll see you next time.